Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Paragliding Debrief. We've got an absolute cracker coming up today. We've got Russell Ogden, former British champion, former world champion, and still a huge part of the international paragliding scene. An absolute national treasure for us British pilots, a very good friend of mine, and a very interesting paraglider pilot to talk to. We're going to be talking all sorts of things today. We're talking being a test pilot, being at the top echelons of glider design, glider testing. We'll be talking about life as a cross-country pilot, a professional, competitive cross-country pilot. So much to come your way. So join me, sit back, relax. Here we go. Another episode of the Paragliding Debrief with Russ Ogden. Let's go. So here we are. Super excited. I'm up in the Côte d'Azur area of France, very near the Ozone headquarters, which means I'm super excited to say I'm sat face to face with what I would describe as British legend, a stalwart of British paragliding, which is Russell Ogden. Hello, Mr. Russell.
Hello, great to have you here.
Wow, I mean, there is so much I'd love to talk to you about today. I'm not even sure where to start. What I'd love to do is, a lot of people in the British paragliding scene obviously know you, well, worldwide know you. And what I'd love to do is just find out a little bit about who Russ is, where you started, how you got into the professional competition scene, becoming a senior test pilot for Ozone. Tell me, where did it all start? Where did your journey begin?
Well, my journey began back in the early 90s, and I first got into the sky through parachuting. My father was a parachutist, a sport parachutist. And so I started parachuting when I was about 16. I think that was the age you had to be to jump. So I did a handful of jumps. But then my father had a bad accident, so I stopped that for my mother's sake. But then my brother found paragliding. This was probably in about 91, 92.
So it hadn't been going for that long in those days, had it?
It'd been going for sort of 6 years. Something like that, and it was just getting into the stages where wings were getting a little bit better. And I started flying in 94, I think it was, just after leaving university, and by which stage the wings were kind of about sorted, ish. Well, it was still the blind leading the blind, but it was a little bit more developed from the late 80s, where it really was development stages. So yeah, I started after I finished university, and I learned with Sussex Paragliding and just became part of that whole family and had a fantastic decade of cutting the mustard on the South Downs and flying our socks off whenever it was flyable, and just living the dream of teaching paragliding and having fun with a beautiful team of people. So
you discovered paragliding, you did your lessons, and then that was a kind of pivotal moment where your life changed, I guess, and then it became...
Well, I met it at the right time in life, where just as I left university and I hadn't really a focus on what to do. So I bumbled into it, and I like many of us, after the first flight, you realise, okay, yeah, this is where I'm at. And I was hooked ever since, and I knew I wanted to make it a profession, really.
Yeah. So you became an instructor?
So I became an instructor. I was a TI, training instructor with Sussex, with Tim Cox, with Carlo Borsatino, Steve Purdy. There was Liz Johnson, and we had a great team, great fun, and learnt loads, progressed loads. Really enjoyed the teaching, and flew with Gandhi, flew with Mark Watts, and so I really had a fantastic team around me, a group of people around me who were really helpful, and we shared information, and we pushed each other along, really, and we learned how to fly. We taught each other how to fly. Well, they taught me how to fly, but it all becomes a self-replicating circle in the end as you exchange information and you learn more. We grew together as pilots, I think.
And I remember when I first came into the sport in 2005. For anyone that's a football fan might remember the Manchester United team of '92, the class of '92, when the Beckhams, the Scholeses, the Nevilles all came through. And I remember getting in just as a training instructor for a school in Wales, hearing about this magical team in Sussex of instructors who were going on to be. Mark Watts, what a phenomenal cross country pilot. And pretty much all of them, I believe, from from that team are still in paragliding now, are still associated in some way. Look at the things you've done. Rob Mansley set up in Spain. Carlo's now Fly Bubble. All of you have gone on to stay in the sport and make it a real success.
Yeah, I think, and part of the success of Sussex was that we had such a great, fun team. We had really good people who were really passionate, really into their flying as well. And that team evolved, like with Rob coming in and Adam and quite a few good instructors. Scrappy came along and it was a really, really good times. I look back at those times with a lot of joy. Actually. It's like those good days in our 20s living in Brighton. It was great fun. It was a really good environment. But we had Wagga didn't really work for Sussex at the time, nor did Gandhi, but they were the hot shots in the Southern Club for XC and really pushing the boundaries. I think they were the only two people who'd flown 100k at that stage in the sport and in the Southern Club, and so they were that's who we all aspired to be, and that's who we learned from, and have been mentors my whole life really, and I always look up to those guys, because they're great pilots and they're still in it today. They haven't broken or given up, and still, the passion wanes with time as you do more and more. I've always said the analogy of your flying life is a bit like a marriage. You have this lustful period at the start where all you can think of and do is flying, and then it has its ups and downs along its journey, with massive highs and massive lows as well. And I think the people who stay in the sport longest are the ones who can ride these highs and lows. And I think for many, they struggle with that part. Yeah. Especially after you've done it long enough. But for me now, it's very much a lifetime thing that I do. And we need to do, like everyone, and I don't need to do it quite so much anymore. I get my fill during my working week, but I still enjoy, doing competitions and the like for my own flight. Yeah. And so for you, when did the passion for cross come? I used to hear stories. I remember hearing stories of you before I'd ever met you, being out on a hill, and you were a pilot would take up, you would play with gliders, you would store them, you would spin them. There was something that little bit extra special that I heard from you, where you were, or about you, where you're always playing with gliders a lot more than, most pilots would do on a hill. So where did that kind of interest, or the interest in cross-country flying and experimenting with gliders and putting them through tricks? Well, I think, when you work as an instructor and you spend a lot of time on hills, ground handling, playing with students, and although you don't get to go cross-country as much as you'd like because you have to work on those flyable days, you do get the opportunity to mess around. And I think being young and being in the right crowd of people, there was a lad, Alan, who used to work with us, and we used to come up with some crazy ideas, and we'd try experimenting things, some of which were not so safe and not so wise. But I think the best thing we came up with, was the spin landing, which I'd never seen before. And it's this can be done. And we'd practice it down at Muggery, and you'd come in low and then just spin the glider hard, and it would spin round, and then eventually you get it so it spins round and you land perfectly, standing facing the wing with it on the ground. And so that became a bit of a thing. Which you get now. Some of the acro boys get a lot of points now if you land on the raft or on the spin landing became a thing, and I'm not sure. It's my only claim to fame. I'm not sure. It was probably it's probably been invented ergonomically on its own elsewhere, but it was something that we did, and we kind of discovered. So it was great fun. And then we started doing it in strong winds, top landing and side landings and all sorts. It eventually got to a stage where we're going to hurt ourselves if we carry on too much. Yeah. But given the right conditions, in nice conditions, in exactly the right sort of perfect conditions, it's a relatively easy, safe thing to do when you know how to do it. Yeah. And then you started off in your cross-country career. Did you have any aspirations to be British champion, world champion, or was it just purely for the passion and love of? No, I think I started to go to competitions with Wagga and Gandhi, and we used to go and do the British Championships, and we'd go up in Wagga's old DAF van and drive to Wales, sit there in the wind and rain for a weekend, and then drive home again. So it was that same old Same old that goes on everywhere. But every now and then we'd get a flying day, and we would do these amazing targets. Which for me, I was still in the very lustful stage of my paragliding career and itching at the bit because I was teaching flying, which was great because it keeps your oar in, but we weren't flying, because we're teaching. So going away to do the British Opens, the British Championships, back in the 90s was our one. What was, as an instructor, was a way you could actually get some decent flying. It was back in the days of cameras, so you had to take photos of each turn point in the FAI sector, and it was terrible. Competitions are so much better nowadays with GPS. You don't even have to stand in a queue anymore. It was endless queuing competitions in the olden days, whereas now the scores are just taken directly from the tracking unit, and you have to do nothing. It's a 5,000% improvement on what we had to do in the old days, which was take a picture of your helmet, take a picture of your face, take a picture of the wing in the air, take a picture of each turn point in FAI sector. You had to land, take a picture in each 4 directions to prove exactly where you were. And if you got any of that wrong, you got 0 points.
Really?
So it was a pain in the ass. And then you had to take your 35mm film and stand in a queue and then give it to the organisers. It was a nightmare for the organisers because they then had to do all of the rolls of film for the 100 pilots and then look at every one to verify everything was correct. So it was an endless process of queuing, protests, counter protests, arguments, and but all good natured and all good fun back in the day. And in amongst that we got some great flying, and that really and back then it was all about cross country. It was the 100k club was it was very rare to be in that club. It was quite an elite club. Still, back to when I left the UK in 2004, there was only probably a dozen people, I think. I don't know exactly, but there wasn't that many people who've done 100k in the UK back in the turn of the century. And now, the 300k club is the elite club.
Yeah.
And 200k is quite common. And I think it's a testament to, the wings that we fly now. And the pilots, we're all much better at flying.
Yeah.
I remember when I learned, the local hotshot in the Southern Club had 100 hours. And we were like, wow, he's got 100 hours. He's like, grey beard, super experienced, 100-hour pilot. And now you think, well, 100 hours is kind of nothing, You're just learning at that stage. So, things have changed. Pilots have got better, wings have got better, and the forecasting has got better. Everything's better in flying nowadays than it was in the 90s.
Yeah. And it must be nice for you. I mean, having started in what you can describe, I guess, as the pioneering days.
I've always seen myself as second generation. It was the pioneering guys were the ones flying the 9 cells. The real pioneers were the guys soaring Rossili back in the late 70s or whatever it was on parachutes. But I'm more second generation, I'd say, second or third generation paragliding pilot.
And at what stage did you start taking an interest in the performance of gliders, the trimming? I mean, was it being in comps? You thought, if I just adjust this line or I trim this, I can go faster. Where did the interest in glider design, improvement, trimming, that kind of thing?
I think it's a natural process of learning to fly and just getting into the sport. We were all into it. We were all into looking at different ways in which because it was a time when there was a lot of development. There was a lot of experimentation. There was a lot of development. We went into diagonal bracings and more stable profiles and a little bit less line drag and the like. And so there was, each year brought a new development, some of which were blind alleys and weren't really that interesting, but others which, have stuck to this day and have been very strong contributions to what we're flying right now. But I guess my interest in that started with jockey. I did a series of SIVs with jockey. So my interest in that started from learning how to fly the wing properly and to be really, because I decided early on, it's clear that, paragliders are really dangerous. We were teaching and we were saying, yes, how safe it is and everything, because that's part of what we do in the teaching, learning process. But in reality, it's really dangerous sport because the wings are super easy to fly and yet really hard to master. So I kind of made it an ambition of mine to try and master how to fly paragliders. And This was in the relatively early days of SOB. Jockey was the only UK person doing it, probably the only UK person who was competent enough to do it. And so I did a handful of, 2 or 3 courses with him, I think. And then I spent a period working with him, just the guy at the top, throwing people off. Did that for a few weeks with Mark Linden as well, who was working with Jockey at the time. So that's really what fired my desire to really understand better how to fly these wings and not allow them to tie up in knots and recover from all situations and the like, and get a mastery of things like the full stall, which was quite scary back in. It was this mythical kind of dark hole back in the days, the stall, because no one knew what we were doing. It was all about discovery, and so learning how to do that was a strong driver for me. And then it went into parachute or helicopters, all that stuff, and it was the early days of the SAT as well. So learning how to do the SAT was super cool. It was just like, this is crazy. We can SAT, And now you look at the 14-year-old kids doing infinite tumbles, twisted, and you think, oh, it's quite embarrassing because we took 2 years to build up to do a SAT,
Which I still think is one of the most beautiful manoeuvres you can do on a paraglide. And without the SAT, you wouldn't have had rhythmic SAT, you wouldn't have had infinite tumbling. So it still holds this huge kind of strong place in the acro world, because it was the gateway to.
You can't negate the contribution that the SAT team, Raoul, Felix, Hernan, and all those guys. And what they did for the sport was super cool. Mike Kung as well, who invented the helico, and Powell that came along a little bit later, but then just crushed it with a whole new load of Esfera and all sorts of tricks that Crazy Powell does. So I think there's been loads of people that have contributed to the acro world, and I was certainly not one of them.
And then, so where did the relationship with Ozone, or how did the relationship with Ozone begin?
So I knew Robbie Whittle. I knew Robbie. I knew Mike as well from the British Championships. And Robbie, years ago, Robbie did a British team training camp with Bob Dury. And Bob was a friend of mine, good friend of mine, and amazing pilot, mountaineer. Really one of the pioneers of British paragliding as well. So I got to know Rob in that, and I think because of my background doing a bit of work with Jockey and actually experimenting myself and trying to improve myself as a pilot, I think Rob saw that, and then when he wanted to quit testing, he was kind of done with testing at the time, and I remember him saying to me, so I'm kind of a little bit done with flying, and I looked at him, it was like I couldn't understand what he was. I couldn't empathise with what he was saying. It was like so abhorrent to me that anyone could not be just completely obsessed by paragliding. But when he said, he wanted to stop testing, and Ozone were looking for another pilot, so they took me on. But by which time I was 30 years old. I was pretty old by which time. But then that's when it really accelerated my learning process, and I progressed a lot in the first few years working with Ozone, learning and doing it all the time.
And it also meant that you had to leave the UK. How you came then to say, we're in France today.
Yeah, we were settled in the UK on the South Downs. I was working with Tim. Kath, my wife, was working as a school teacher. We were settled and it was nice, but this opportunity came, and it was I've always said to my kids, when doors open, walk through them. Take a look around, check both directions, but then step through them if it feels good and right. So it was just one of those opportunities in life which, for me as a young guy who wanted to dedicate his life to paragliding, to get a job with a manufacturer was quite rare, and a good opportunity to learn and develop myself. So we walked into it and we moved to France. It's a big old, that's what I learned that then. I don't particularly like change. It's really hard to make a change, like moving to a different country. But and it's had its challenges living in France. It's not easy being away, especially growing up a young family in a foreign country without your support network directly there close to you was a bit more in a language that you don't really understand very well. It had its own challenges, yeah, but it's all been good fun.
And when was that now? How long has it been?
That was 2004, so it's nearly 20 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 19 years now I've been working with those. Yeah.
And for me, and I think, and for a lot of paraglider pilots, we all know that these companies exist, that they have the test pilots, and but we never kind of see what goes on. I mean, and the incredible progress, advancement that has been in the paragliding world. Some of the modern gliders now, you were saying the 100K club was a very special club to be in. And it still is, but it's so much easier to do now with the performance of gliders.
Yeah.
And I remember I've been sitting there for years, and my students, my paragliding friends, going, "Well, where can it go next? Surely there can't be any more improvements." Then the shark nose technology came out. Now there's these 2-liner gliders in a category that normal recreational pilots can fly. And every time we as the general public, as it were, think that must be it. There can only be a finite point to improving the technology, but still yet it continues. But what is the day-to-day? So, what does, because we were talking last night, and you were saying about, you live very close to what's the site that you do most of the testing on?
In Gordon.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And you're flying there a lot, nearly every day. But how does it work? There's a lot of magic and pixie dust that goes into glider design from the general public's point of view. We never actually see what the day-to-day job is. How would you describe your day-to-day job as a test pilot?
Well, my job is relating the designs that the designers make, that Luke makes normally, and David, and we then have to. The beautiful thing about flying is that the designing is one thing. The only way to test them is by flying them. You can't really model. It's too complex to model because it's a 3D bridge structure, aerodynamic bridge structure that moves around all the time. So it's very hard to model. And we're still in very much the barnstorming days of development, where you have to suck it and see. You have to test it and see. But what we're not doing nowadays is making huge radical changes. Think of it as a continuum. We started back in the 90s with a design for a beginner wing, with a design for an intermediate wing, with a design for a high performance wing. And we've just made step-by-step, design change along the way. Sometimes we branch off and go in a new direction. But I guess it's probably like the shape of a pine tree. It branches out in the early years of development, and you learn what works, what doesn't. And slowly we're getting closer to the top of the pyramid. And I think, in terms of high-performance wings like Enzo 3, which has been at the top now for 7 years, and it's still arguably the best wing, although there are a few others that are there, very close, as good as. But it's testament to the wing that it's been there for 7 years at the top and still continues to be at the top, winning competitions. But it also shows that it's getting harder to actually go up that next step, which that's the reason for the submarine, because the low-hanging fruit is in the harness and in the drag of the pilot. So we probably jumped on it with the submarine, this type technology, we've jumped on a generation of wing design as well. It just gives a slight edge. And hopefully for the next iteration of the Enzo, we will make another slight edge. But I would imagine we've still got improvements to make in Paragliding.
Right.
And it will be down into construction techniques to really reduce the wrinkles, to really make it more aerodynamically clean. We're at the limit of lines now, I'd say, with the current materials that we all use. We can't really optimize lines whilst maintaining a reasonable safety margin, which is 8G, a maximum load. So I don't think we're going to reduce line drag a huge amount at the moment without any other other improvements in line materials. I think aerodynamically the profiles now that we're using are going more towards more CM positive, so more reflex in them. In the early days of flying, what made flying very dangerous was because we had so much line drag, we had to compensate for that, designers made very heavily cambered profiles, and heavily cambered profiles are very pitch unstable. So it's why you used to see, wings with not a very high top speed because of the line drag normally, and you'd accelerate them and then become very unstable and collapse all the time. And another way to get around all of that drag was to make a very flat arc. So the wings were super flat. So when the glider collapsed, it was really aggressive. It had an aggressive profile with a very flat arc, which made gliders slow, unstable, and aggressive when they collapsed. So that's why the early days of paragliding was relatively, and people who were flying these wings were all low airtime beginner pilots who didn't really know what was going on. Everyone was learning. So the wings nowadays have a much more neutral, almost CM positive profile, which is good for pitch stability. We have higher arcs, which is great for side collapse behavior. And we have, it's also good for holding the structure and making the bridge, our aerodynamic, our flying bridge, as I like to think of them, as a much more stable platform. So we've got good speed, good solidity at that speed now, much better than we had in the day. So most of the advancements have been in accelerated flight. If you take a 2 generations ago wing of whatever model you choose, and you do a trim speed glide, you won't see a great deal of difference. But if you do a full speed glide, you will see the difference.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going. We're making our slow flying magic carpet wings more efficient at speed. So when you upgrade, you're only really going to see benefits if you do fly accelerated. So if you are flying cross country and you're trying to fly speed to fly and the like, it just gives you more range. You arrive at the next thermal higher, and that's what's allowed, along with improvement in pilot skills, knowledge, share of information and the like. That's what's made that 100 club so fantastically big now.
Yeah.
So the flying is still improving. We've still got places we can go. We've got refinements to go, but it is getting harder and harder to get into the top of the pyramid of where we're going to get. And eventually we'll be, unless something radically changes. Because also another important thing about our sport is that we want it to be able to be folded away, put in a bag that we can carry. And if we stick to those core values of what paragliding is, we're limited by physics and aerodynamics. So we are getting near that apex, but unless there's a radical change and we end up going down another road in the search of endless performance, I think we're going to see incremental changes in the next few years.
And the pilot development thing that you were talking about then, how well pilots have come on, how much better understanding, how better, just the understanding. There's a lot more we can learn from the old school kind of guys. There's a lot of videos out there now. And pilot development was something you were hugely involved with as well. I mean, you were massively inspirational to me. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to become an SIV instructor. It would have been a lot harder. And SIV was something you did for 12, 13 years. And we know that Jockey Sanderson was one of the first ones to do SIV, but equally as well, there was you from the UK. For me, it was you and Jockey Sanderson that were really pushing forward in the SIV training. And I guess, Ozone never had a problem, although you were committed to them, to also still being able to do your own thing, still being able to be the rusty instructor. The teaching side of it, again, for me, it was easy. I had the luxury of you taking me on and training me and being able to show me the ropes. But back in the day, how did you kind of learn yourself to become an SIV instructor? Or were you
I learned from Jockey.
Right.
Jockey taught me how to do it. I learned from Jockey. I saw how brilliant Jockey was with people, how brilliant he was with knowing and understanding gliders, because he'd done some ACPL testing back in the day, AFNOR testing, I think, which was the early days of certification flying. He did a certification course with the guys. So I learned from Jockey, and then taught myself a lot over the ground, various places, not particularly safe, but I've always been very cautiously progressive. So I would ensure that I got something really dialed before I went to the next step. So that's my progression was slow, but it was a stubborn continuum, because there wasn't the information out there, And and also coming and working and starting. Well, before I actually moved to France, I did some work with Ozone on a comp wing that they made back in 2000. This was 2001, I think, 2000. And that's what got me into trimming and just making a change and seeing if you could feel the difference. And sometimes you make a change and you can't feel the difference, but you're always desperately trying to feel that difference. So that made me start to really think about the wing and the way it flies and the brakes and how you pull the brakes and what action it does on the wing and all of the intricacies that you need when developing a wing. But yeah, so I learned really from jockey. So my early courses, I even phoned up jockey when I said, look, jockey, if you don't mind, because jockey was the only guy doing it in Paragliding, and I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to do my own courses, because I felt like I was stepping on his toes, and I was like, oh, how's he going to take it? And he couldn't have been more lovely. He offered me advice, help, encouragement, and it was really, lovely experience. So I started teaching SOV, probably around about the turn of the century, I think, and did it for a decade, 12 years. I did it with Adam, did it with Rob as well, and then I did it with Adam when Rob moved to Spain, and we had a great time. Like I said, we had 7 people in the water over the 12 years or 13 years. Nobody died, no one lost out to sea. And it was one of those things that we decided to quit while we were ahead. Adam moved into doing new things in his life, and it felt like it was the right time to pass the baton on, because other people like yourself came along, and it was good. It was good to learn through all of that, and see how the courses progressed from. I always called mine the control course, rather than SIV course, and it was about pilotage. It was about improving your connection with the wing and then doing some collapses and a bit of stalls and everything. And so it was, and it's interesting to see now. I was with Malin at Flyo in the autumn, and watching how he teaches and how the whole system has progressed and moved on, and it's good to see that people like Malin, and I'm sure yourself, are doing a better job than what I was doing a decade ago, with a better understanding and a better way of teaching. So it's all about progression. And I think we as a community we've definitely improved because more and more people are learning how to fly their wings properly. More and more people have a better understanding, a better connection with their wing. And I think that's only a good thing, and I hope we continue that in the future. It's really important.
It's become very popular as well. Like back in the day when I heard you talking about, people doing the full stall, that was the nemesis almost. And, SIVs used to have a fair degree of horror stories with them.
Yeah.
People would go home. You'd never hear about all the good bits they did in the week. You'd hear about that one moment they had, or the time they went in the water, or the stall, or whatever it is. Yeah. But with gliders being better, with the understanding being better, with more pilots being around, what's been lovely for me in the last 5-10 years is to see the attitude change from control courses, from SIV courses, and the enthusiasm now. They've become a fun course. And there's a clear benefit to be seen from pilots doing SIV courses.
They were always fun.
Yes. No, absolutely. But it's really nice to see the attitude change and how busy, and there's a lot more people coming through, there's a lot more schools opening that are teaching it, but there seems to be plenty for everyone,
Yeah, and long may it continue. I think it's the way we have to be, because, like I said, these paragliders are dangerous, so you've got to do it to the best of your ability. Yeah, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. And so the other side of Russ Ogden, so the competition side, you're a PWC pilot, a comp pilot, obviously very passionate about it. I remember talking to you a little while ago, maybe 8-10 years ago, and you said, "Wow, I'm thinking of maybe starting to think about retiring," and then you became world champion. You've been British champion. You recently won was it the American?
US Nationals.
US Nationals, yeah.
In Chillán, yeah.
So there's clearly still a big hunger and a big passion. Retirement comes, then we get back into it. Retirement comes, and
I have embarrassingly had a couple of retirements, but I keep coming back for more because I love it, and I really enjoy. I really enjoy the flying I do for work, developing wings, and I do that as a 9-to-5 job. So I fly pretty much every day is flyable during the week, which means I have my weekends at home, looking after the house, the garden, bringing up the family, the girls, the dog. And so I have a normal kind of family life outside of flying. And I'm fortunate that I can fly 5 days a week. But the flying that I do really for myself, and the passion that drives my flying is competition flying, is task-based flying. I've lost a bit of interest in cross-country flying per se. Just to fly 100 kilometres to me now is not that interesting, whereas doing 100 kilometres with all your friends all trying to do the same thing and having a bit of a ding-dong race, wacky races to get there first is, for me, the beautiful game. It's so engaging on many levels. And we've just come back from Chelan, which is my favourite place to fly in the world.
And that's up near Seattle in the United States?
Near Seattle, north west America, and it's pretty much flatland flying with just the most amazing, high quality, pleasurable, delicious, smooth, juicy, perfect flying.
Yeah.
And I just really love that place. I really enjoyed my time there. And there's a handful of places around the world that I really enjoy flying. I think I've got to the stage in my career now where I've kind of realised that my real passion is for flatland flying rather than mountain flying. Mountain flying I've done loads of, but I find it a bit dangerous, and I've exposed myself to that risk so much that I want to reduce my exposure to that risk, which means I'll still do competitions. I still do 2 or 3 a year, but I'll try and be picky and choosy and go to where I want to go and fly. If a comp rolls up that sounds interesting, or that's a beautiful venue, then they're the comps I'll go for, rather than just going for another PWC in Annecy or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just going to become a bit more picky and choosy where I go to fly.
Yeah. And do you find, you've been doing it for a very long time, and so, there are a lot of names that have been in the PWC or been in the competition scene for a long time. So you must get to know each other, you get to know how you fly, you get to know the characteristics. So I would imagine it must get more and more fun to go back, and you're competing against people you've been competing against for a long time. Then there's always that random factor of the new guys that are coming through.
Yeah.
But it must be great for some of you guys who've been in it a long time to go, right, the battle's on again. And there's that.
Yeah, there's a few of us old bulls out there now that have been, growing old together and still out there doing the same stuff. And it's beautiful. It's all part of that big community that the paragliding world is, and the competition world is a smaller one of that big community, But I think we're blessed actually, because the paragliding community around the world are just populated by amazing, beautiful people that are all from different walks of life, all quite random, and it's a really nice environment, and populated by a lot of very good people.
Yeah. And you're not just the testing stuff, the flying in comps yourself. You're involved with the Ozone Shabra Open, and I believe before you won the US Nationals just recently, there's an equivalent in Chelan.
Yeah, the Chelan Ozone Open. Yeah.
So you get involved with all that kind of stuff, and you're deeply involved with the BPRA, which is the UK system for the BPRA, so the British Paragliding
Racing Academy.
That's the one. Which is a fantastic system to allow a pathway for new and young pilots to come through, to keep the kind of the quality that we've had of British pilots coming through into the comp scene, which again is something you're heavily involved with. So it must be difficult sometimes to find time in your day for anything else, being involved in so many different...
It's all a juggle act, and it's why I'm trying to do less competitions. In Ozone now we've got Ono Amar, who's quite good at paragliding, and we got Baptiste Lambert, who is also quite good, and Luke, and they're still keen and eager to do the comps and the high level comps. So they can do that, and I can do more of I quite really enjoy going to the US Nationals. That's the lower level comp, but the Ozone Open in America. The Shabra I haven't done for a while. Must go to the Shabra soon. Jockey normally does those. But yeah, hopefully with doing less competitions allows me to go and do those more fun type competitions. And I think teaching has been something that I've done, my whole adult life in paragliding, whether it was teaching day one beginners all the way to teaching the British team. And I think I really like the fact that we can bring people on in a fast track method almost. That I'm learning slowly that there is no fast track method here. It's a long grind to get good at this game. And even when you get good, you realise you're not that good. So it's a long journey, but I think we've had success with the likes of Theo, who became European champion when he was 21 years old, and he started with us when he was 16, and obviously he was already super talented. His dad had done a good job teaching him and keeping him safe, and we just polished what was already there, I think. And and we've seen it with Seb Ospina as well, who's just world class now, and I'm looking forward to seeing him be world champion next time. And a handful of people have just come through and done really, really well with it. But best of all, we've created this lovely little community that have become friends, and that healthy side of competitiveness, but friendship, and that's what drives people. And when they see their mate doing really well, they know, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And it's a self-serving loop. So Malin's done a really good job setting it all up, making it happen, and Guy Anderson, Barney, and myself, we've done some courses over the years that have been pretty successful, and people have learned and got something from. And we hope to develop that in the future. We want to keep the momentum, keep it going, making improvements. Seb's now doing some weekends, and some of the guys that have been with the group for many years are now also doing little weekends here and there. So it's not just me doing the coaching anymore. Everyone is now helping and coaching each other, and hopefully we can all get together this year, and it will come together at the British Championships, where there'll be some training done there with everyone together, and then I'm going to do a week in Saint Andre here to get the new guys to come on, so we can go through that and rinse them out for a week, and get people moving through the sky a bit faster. That's the aim ultimately, and yeah, it's great fun. Really enjoy it.
And it's a real tactical game, isn't it? I always see, especially competitive cross-country flying, as a game of chess. It's not just about climbing, pushing on bar, and disappearing off into the ether. There's a lot of tactics, I would imagine, that are involved in competitions. When to push on, when to hang back.
Yeah, it's a world of infinite complexity, and there's all you can have golden rules, but there'll always be exceptions to those rules. So it's a lot of hit and miss, and it's a challenging, beautiful, frustrating game, and it's testament, because Ono is on a podium streak of 13, I think it is at the moment, which means he's hit the podium in 13 comps in a row, and we're talking World Championships, European Championships, Super Finals, PWCs. We're talking high-level comps here, and to do that 13 times in a row on a podium is exceptional. I mean, no one's ever done that. So what he does is quite exceptional, really. And the rest of us try to kind of get there. And every dog has his day. Everyone can do it on his day, but be able to do it regularly, that's the hard challenge, and not something that not many pilots get to that level. Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the aspiring cross-country pilots that are listening to this, especially from the UK system, how does the BPRA work? Where do you need to be at before you can kind of be considered when they come into it? What's the kind of training structure? How does it all work?
The most important driving factor in all of this is desire. You have to, first of all, want to aspire and desire to be a high-level competition pilot, preferably representing your country to fly the World Championship. That's the pure aim. And if you've got that in place, that's the majority of it done. We will take people who've got, we've got quite a broad range from very experienced pilots that have been flying for 25 years and competing for 25 years to those that have been flying for 4 or 5 years and just getting into the competitions. Okay, so we don't really care where you are on that curve. The most important thing is the desire to want to be good. You know, we're not there to just have a kind of, let's go on a jolly flying holiday with your mates. We're doing that, but we're doing it with the aim to produce and help pilots who are self-motivated and committed to this sport. And so if you show commitment and desire, we're all in, you know. So, but you can apply online. You look on the web, you apply online. It's for British pilots only, or people who can fly for the British team. And yeah, we're totally happy to take on new applicants and take on anyone who wants that to do that.
Yeah. And alongside the tactical side of it and the cross-country side of it, you also do a lot of kind of glider control with them. So you'll take these, you know, and a lot of people are flying the Enzos, whatever, the Xenos, whatever it might be. But you actually take them away and get them to learn how to fly those properly in terms of putting them through SIV, pilotage, control course kind of situations as well.
Yep, Manning runs those now. At Flyo, he's got perfect setup, very good understanding of what he's teaching and good methods to teach. So yeah, he's taken on that baton and he does the control SIV courses, control courses. Yeah, but that's something we started here in Monaco, and I think, you know, it's part and parcel of it. You have to be able to fly at the top level. You need to fly a weapon. You can't take a knife to a gunfight, so you need to be able to fly the competition wings. And to do that safely in the long term, you need to be able to fly them properly. Yeah. So it's very much a integral part of what we do. Sometimes it's hard to find the balance between that and race training. Our focus is race training. You know, we kind of expect, yes, we offer it as part of the course, but we also expect that people outside of the BPRI do it of their own accord, in their own time, and spend the money on it, because it's a absolutely necessary investment in your flying career.
And there's some really, I mean, we were talking last night, there's some fantastic young talent coming through. A friend of mine, Dylan Mansley, he's only 19, I believe.
Dylan is fantastic. We've got Jacob Butterworth coming through, who's really talented young man. And yeah, like I said, to me, these guys form the core of our future. And I think we really need to nurture these guys, encourage and help and support as much as we can, along with lots of other also really interesting pilots coming through who are motivated, keen and talented. So I think it's just a case of doing our best to really open doors to people to see what's possible, and help them just take their hand a little bit down the difficult journey that it is to become top level.
And it's great they get encouragement, because one of the things I've seen and heard around the way is, for example, you know, I live in the same village as Dylan, and he's out all the time. All the time. If it's flyable, if the sun's up and it's flyable, he'll be out. But occasionally you get murmurs from, there's loads of young lads. There's a great little Spanish team as well. These young lads, 18, 19, 20. A lot of them are now flying NC3s. You know, a lot of them buying submarine harnesses. But every now and again you hear people going, oh, he's going to kill himself, look at him. He's only 19 and he's flying that. And I think the bit they don't see is how much work these guys are putting in. How many hours, you know, they're doing hours a month that some of these pilots who are criticising struggle to do in a year. So it's really nice that there's actually a support network to encourage them to come through. You know, it's okay to be progressing on gliders if you have the talent, the desire, if you're flying as regularly and playing with them as regularly as a lot of these people I see are. Yeah. It's not always the case. Yeah, I'm sure. In the general paragliding world, I see it all the time. Recreational pilots jumping onto a higher rated wing to make up for the gaps in their own lack of knowledge or understanding. If I buy a better wing, it's going to make me a better pilot, which obviously just doesn't work. No. But it's not always the case when you see these young kids coming through.
Yeah, but these young kids like Dylan, they've got that solid foundation.
Yes.
You know, he can do a twisted Misty into the helico.
Yes.
You know, which I can't do. So they have an inherent skill, spatial awareness and touch and control of a wing, which is normally way beyond the same guys that are murmuring on the hill saying they shouldn't fly this wing, you know?
Yeah.
So I think if you've got the French have proved it, that, you know, this second generation, normally kids of existing pilots that are coming through. They're all in their 1920s, mid-20s now, or 30, like Ono. They've all just been doing it since they were 14, 15, and they're bloody good at it. And they're way better than we were after doing it for 20 years, just after a few years. So I think it's always hard to encourage people to step up a level of wing, because there is always an inherent increased risk by taking on more aspect ratio, more speed. But if you want to fly at the top level, then these are the machines that you have to learn to fly. And these are the machines that you have to train religiously to get to be able to fly them safely. And I'd say, the way that someone like Dylan or the young guys, especially with the acro background, it is the safest, best way to progress up to flying that sort of machine.
Yeah. And for sure, I mean, for any critics who are listening, or you guys wouldn't contemplate the thought of taking them on if you thought that they were not right for the equipment, or is that a fair comment, or is it good that you take them on because
we vet in Ozone, we vet most sales of the Enzo when they're new. What we can't do is vet second-hand sales. So we, if we get orders from an Enzo that we're not 100% sure about, we'll question the dealer and we'll find out exactly who it's for and why they need it, blah, blah, blah. But we can't do that with second-hand wings. So there is, but I think our whole community is pretty self-serving in that matter. There's not that many people who are inexperienced and fly those wings without the skills to do so.
Yeah.
There's quite a few very experienced pilots who maybe don't have the skills to do so, to fly those wings, but their experience gets them through. But what we don't have is the inexperienced, untalented people jumping up onto them. I don't see that a great deal anymore. That used to be the case 20, 30 years ago, because you had to get enough performance to fly cross country. Now you can do 200k on an EMB wing, so there isn't that need to go up to the top level. And I think our community is pretty well self-serving on that matter, and there's not many people who push too hard that envelope. You don't have to anymore. Yeah. I mean, we've been working on the new E&A wing. I've just been loving it. Tight handling, super roll control, yaw control. You can turn tighter than any comp wing. You can climb out in little gnats farts, and they're just so much fun now. Yeah. And they're so good, and they're solid, they're fast. I have loads of fun flying E&A wings. Yeah. E and B wings, the comp wings are nice, but they're not absolutely necessary. Yeah. Yeah, for fun.
And the technology, the advancements, I see it on my SIVs. Obviously, now I've been doing SIVs for a good 8 to 10 years. And it's incredible now, the performance we have, the safety we have, the fun we have. I mean, it's such a magical time to be in the sport. ENAs now are very good gliders. You can do. I mean, I remember a few years ago. I can't remember quite when.
They're nice to fly.
They are lovely. The handling is nice. Yeah, easy to launch, easy to land. Yeah. And I remember Mark Watts a few years ago, because everyone was saying, well, of course you're doing these good distances from the South Downs because you're flying Enzo. So we went to Sussex, grabbed a Mojo 4, Mojo 5 maybe, I think, smashed 100k on that, just to prove the point that you don't have to have some,
No, you just got to point it in the right direction.
Exactly. And so for Russ Ogden, where do you go now? I mean, you're going to cherry pick some comps. I mean, is there going to be a retirement, come back? Or what happens for you now? Where do we go?
Well, we said at the Worlds, me and Jockey, because Jockey's been our team leader for the last few years, and we were saying, right, this is our last one in France just last month. This is our last one, definitely our last one, definitely our last one. And we finished second, which we were dead proud of, because the French kind of dominated the whole comp, and for the rest of us mortals, it was a race for the podium. It was a competition to hold our position on the podium. We dropped down to fourth halfway through it, and we came back and we finished second, which we were super proud of, dead proud of. And I was so proud of the boys and the team that we had. It was fantastic. And we had a fantastic couple of weeks, a lot of fun, a lot of laughter. And we're driving back on the last night, getting to go get ready for the party. And Jockey says, well, look, Russ, if you do another one, I'll do another one. And I thought, oh, come on, jockey. All right then. Because the next one's in Brazil. So if I can get qualified for the team in Brazil, I'll do one more, but only if jockey does it.
What does that take when you say getting qualified? What do you need to do to be
So
able to?
We have a very much a objective team selection process in the British team. We don't have any smoky backroom subjective decisions made by a random group of people. We have a system based upon the world ranking. So our top 2 world ranking pilots go through, and then the other 2 males are chosen from their best score in a competition. So if you roll up and do one competition and you win a World Cup, for example, that will pretty much guarantee you a place in the British team.
Right.
So it's a few years ago I didn't qualify for the team, and it means next year I'm going to have to do a couple of comps. I have to pull my finger out and get a couple of good results to get in the team. So it's it's a very good system, in fact, because we generally take the best pilots.
It's not what your name is or anything like that. No, it's who has the best results.
It's who has the best results, and it generally gives us our strongest team. And it's also a great way for everyone to try and push to get in and fly in a style, fly in a manner to force themselves in the team.
Yeah.
You know? And so I'm going to try my best to get in the team. I may not happen. And, you know, like I said earlier, it's about, and I had this conversation with Guy Anderson, and because he was, you know, a stalwart of the British team for many, many years. And he was really instrumental in the BPRA and helping out, and was a real driving force behind it. And it would be great to be in a position where I can no longer get in the team, because everyone has grown around me as pilots and are better.
Yeah.
You know, and then I feel like, okay, yeah, it's a good time to retire. You know, because after I won the Worlds, my wife was like, why don't you retire now? Why don't you retire? And I was like, well, to me, it's almost like a cop-out, you know, to just say, okay, I've won now, bye-bye.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you should go through the process of doing it whilst you enjoy it, doing it whilst you're, you know, I'm good enough to be in the team, therefore I feel like I should be in the team to represent the country, because, you know, I'm passionate about British paragliding team, and I want us to do well and continue to do well. So if we're in a situation where I can no longer get in the team, I'm a happy man.
Will that though, will that ignite the slight competitive edge though to...
Of course it does.
So then it was like, well, okay, so now these guys are beating me, so I want to, you know, it'd be a difficult one. I can see that would be a difficult one to retire from.
That's what we all need to keep getting better.
Absolutely, yeah.
We need that competition to keep getting better. So it's a perfect circle.
And something again we were chatting about last night, which is quite sad in a way, is we have a real lack of female competition pilots. I mean, we had Kirsty Cameron, who was an epic pilot, but
Kirsty's definitely going to dust her socks off and come to Brazil. We've already had this discussion.
Right.
She may not agree with me, but we'll get there.
By hook or by crook.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you notice in the international comp scene, are there that many females that compete? I mean, there's a lot of female pilots in the sport now.
There is a lot of female pilots, especially in France. They make up something like 17% of the pilot population in France, with a much younger demographic. In the UK, they make up, I believe, 6%. With a much older demographic. So we have a bit of a problem in UK in attracting female pilots to our sport. We then even have a bigger problem attracting female pilots to fly competitions. And there are so many factors for that. But it's something that there are some movements and groups trying to deal with that matter at the moment, to try and encourage more women into our sport and more women into competing, because we need to be a bit like America, who right now have 3, 4, 5 really competitive girls, and the 2 of which represent the team are really world-class female pilots. At the moment in British flying, we have Kirsty, who is a world-class female pilot. And but what we need is 3 or 4 others to keep that momentum going, to keep that push going, to help off each other, bounce off each other, and we need to try and make that happen. Yeah. So we are on it. We're currently in the brainstorming phases of trying to address it, but we always try to encourage. We've got quite a few within the BPRA who are very keen, and we're going to try and nurture them as best we can.
Perfect. Russ, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've got to wrap it up, but man, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to do this one, and also for being inspiration and the help that you were in my career. It's been super interesting to get to know the Russ Ogden.
No, thank you, Lee.
And we'll be in touch. We'll be back. Hopefully we can do something more. Hopefully the next comp season will go well. Yeah. And we look forward to seeing how the young blood come through.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well.
Lovely. Thank you, buddy.
Cheers, Lee.
And there we go. Thank you so much to Russ Ogden. I really, really enjoyed doing that one today. That was an absolute cracker. If you enjoyed it as much as we hope you did, and as much as I enjoy doing these, we would really appreciate it if you could spread the word, if you could share it around. Tell your fellow pilots about the Paragliding Debrief. Your love and support with these is always appreciated. We have so much interesting content coming your way. In a couple of days, I drive back to the south of France for a sit-down face-to-face with Bruce Goldsmith, with Anna and the BGD team. So until then, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Paragliding Debrief.